Hello, everybody, and welcome. I'm here with our fire chief here in Dublin, Chief Cutler, and it's National Fire Prevention Month. And you know, as I was studying through gobs of notes and things on the internet, Chief, there is a lot of things when I see percentages. Only 48% know this, 20% know that, only 30% know this. I'm surprised at what we, the public, does not know about fire safety.
Yes, sir. It is surprising. What you would think that would be common knowledge is not common knowledge. So we try our best to get the word out.
And what a great month to do that. The weather's changing some. It's feeling good outside. It's football season. And we do so many things, and we're going to cover a wide array of things, but right up front, let's talk about smoke detectors. I can't believe that only 48% of Americans, and I'm sure 48% or less, it could be a few more that's watching us, don't know that we need working smoke detectors.
That's right. Everyone needs to have a working smoke detector, and a way that we as a fire department try to be proactive in that. If we respond to a call, we try to check the residents to make sure that there are working smoke detectors. Whether it was for a fire or whether it was for a gas leak, we try to be proactive and check. If the residents don't have working smoke detectors, then we have an option for that.
What is that option?
We have businesses in the city of Dublin that donate money every year, and we take that money to buy smoke detectors. If the people cannot afford them, then we'll come to the house and we'll put them in, or if they don't, if they'd rather put them up themselves, then we can give them a couple. There's just a little bit of paperwork. The paperwork is just basically us being able to show where those detectors went, and if we put them up, it's got a little bit of a waiver of liability. So if the detector does not operate, then it doesn't hold the city of Dublin liable for that.
Okay, well, that's only smart there, but we want to thank our businesses. That tells you the kind of community we live in, Chief, that our local businesses care enough, because the fires we have during the year, the loss of life we have, just seems like every year it might be a small heater in the bedroom that catches fire, or candles that we left lit, or something on the stove or whatever, but and it's always tragic when we hear about it, that someone is bad enough. Our pastor was talking this weekend about the things going on in Texas and Florida and places like that with the hurricanes, but he mentioned tragedies in our lives that happen, and one of them he mentioned was someone losing their home to fire. And you know, I got to thinking of that, knowing I was going to talk to you today, but what a tragedy that would be. If you've never been through it, you don't know.
That's right.
But it's just got to be a tough situation.
It is. Anytime that someone loses everything that they own, potentially, it is a very traumatic situation, and we try to be very compassionate at those times and understanding. A lot of times the people are yelling and screaming, and we just let it roll off of us, because they are going through the worst day of their life. But as you were alluding to, not having a working smoke detector, that incident can go so much worse, and we may end up dealing with trying to get somebody out. Where if they had a working smoke detector, because you know at night when you're asleep, you're at your most vulnerable point, and if you sleep like I do, and my wife will tell you, I can sleep through a tornado coming through. But you're in deep sleep, and the fire starts, and those detectors, they go off pretty early in the fire. So if you're alerted early, then you can go ahead and get out, and all we've got to worry about is putting the fire out, because when we get to the fire, the first thing we're concerned with is life safety. The building is always secondary. The contents are always secondary. It's the people that could potentially be trapped in the building.
Yeah. And where should we have, you know, most people say, well, I got one in the kitchen. You know, that's good enough. I got one in the back of the house. Is that good enough? Shouldn't we have them in every room in the house?
That would be the optimal. It's recommended to have at least 2 on each floor of the house. So if you got a 2-story house, you need to have 2 downstairs and 2 upstairs. But if you could have one, and I myself being fire-minded, I do have them in each room of the house, so and the kids' bedrooms, so they've got their own smoke detectors. But at least one by the kitchen, near the kitchen. You don't want it so close that every time you cook something it goes off. So you have to put it where, because some people do use a smoke detector to know when the biscuits are done.
Yeah, or the toast burns.
That's right.
In my case.
So we want to have it close to the kitchen, because a lot of our fires are caused by cooking or unattended cooking. So you want one close to the kitchen. So if you do lay down, forget about it. You'll find out about it before it's too late. And then we also need them at least outside of the sleeping areas, because a lot of people sleep with their bedroom doors closed. Some people don't. So it's good to have them outside the sleeping area, and if you can afford to have enough of them, then having one in the sleeping area, so if the fire starts in your room.
And how often, and I say this because I know time's about to change coming up here and very shortly, and a lot of us use that as a guide. Is that a good guide? Is there a better guide? When should we change the batteries in them?
That is a good guide, because you know that's something that's going to happen like clockwork. You're going to have to set your clock back or spring ahead and fall back. So that's a good time to change those batteries. Now, if you went ahead and you bought one of the detectors that doesn't have a changeable battery, it's a simple 10-year detector, then you would just need to test it routinely. Once a month will be a good schedule to test it on. And the other thing is, we do keep batteries, so if the battery is what's keeping you from having a working smoke detector, then we can help with that also. But the typical life, and they do have a life expectancy on them, 10 years. If we go in a house and checking for the smoke detectors and it's over 10 years old, we recommend changing it. Even though it's not malfunctioning, 10 years is about the life of them.
Okay, and in the city of Dublin, we promote municipal gas a lot here in the city of Dublin, because that is a product of the city of Dublin natural gas. But so a lot of people use gas. Well, even in our home, we live in the county, we have gas logs. So we have the fire detector and the carbon monoxide detector. I'm surprised, Chief, at how inexpensive they really are, especially when you look at that price and think about not only your life, but your home and your grandparents' pictures and all those sentimental things that we could name. You know, it'd take us forever to name everything, but I'm surprised at how inexpensive they are. But if you are in the city of Dublin, or say you got gas logs, you live in the county, or use propane gas, we need carbon monoxide, because you can't smell that, and then you don't even know it's coming.
That's exactly right. So if you do have gas appliances, you do need the carbon monoxide detector. We don't provide those. We only provide smoke detectors. But like you say, it's the irreplaceable things such as life and those other things, the mementos and all. It's just so you can save so much by spending so little.
That's right.
But as you were saying, the carbon monoxide is colorless, it's odorless. And we have had some fatalities in Lawrence County, in Dublin and Lawrence County, because of carbon monoxide.
Yeah.
So it is a valuable tool. And if your detector goes off, they're normally set to go off pretty early. So if it's going off, the best thing to do is go ahead and leave the house, because just because you're not feeling the effects of it does not mean that there's not a lethal amount in the building.
That's right, absolutely.
So call us and we'll be glad to come monitor the air. We'll determine if it's a faulty detector or if we actually do have a problem that's causing the carbon monoxide, and we'll also ventilate the carbon monoxide out of the building.
Better safe than sorry, huh?
Exactly. That's how we always say. We'd rather you to call than not call.
That's right. That's what we're here for. There's no doubt about it. So we're going to take a commercial break and come back and talk about escape plans and meeting places, things that maybe you have not thought of lately. We want to remind you of those things, but we're going to take a commercial break, and we'll be back right after this. At Bank of Dudley, we understand that buying a new home is a time of many decisions, and we're here to help and answer all of your questions that might arise during the mortgage loan process. Our mortgage professionals, Shirley Clements and Sherry Adderhall, have over 75 years of combined mortgage experience, backed by a bank that has served this community since 1905. Call or come by and visit with Sherry or Shirley at our Veterans Boulevard branch, or go online at bankofdudley.com and get started today. Bank of Dudley, creating a custom mortgage experience with competitive rates and terms is what service is all about. Bank of Dudley, member FDIC, and an equal housing lender.
Choose the convenience of Neighbors Express and get friendly, courteous service every time you visit any of our convenient locations. Fill up with pay at the pump and take advantage of our bigger and better selection of beverages and tobacco products. And buy 12 packs of Pepsi products, 2 for $6.99. Enjoy the popular crushed ice with your favorite fountain drink. Also enjoy a fresh, hot breakfast. Stop by for lunch or dinner. It's always fresh, always convenient at Neighbors Express. Now located at I-16 and 441 and in Cedar Grove, providing farm fuel for all our customers. Count on the convenience of Neighbors Express.
Welcome back, everybody. I still have with me Chief Cutler here. We are here at one of the Dublin Fire Departments here in Dublin and talking about escape routes. I understand that you need 2 escape routes from each room.
That's right.
Okay, explain that to me. We were talking off camera a while ago, and I was trying to get educated on some things, but I was talking to you about homes that may not have but one window in a room, and a lot of the older homes, you know, I know some of the windows is hard to get up. You can't get up. Talk about that, escape routes, having a meeting place, things like that.
That's right. It is important to identify 2 ways out of your home because you never know where and when the fire is going to occur. So if you've got a plan already, then you know the 2 ways out. As far as the windows, it's best to have working windows. If you painted them shut, try to work on that and get them to where they do operate, because that may be your only way of escape. We teach the kids, if they're in bed at night, they hear the smoke detector go off, then they go to the door, they crawl to the door, they feel the door. If they feel heat or see smoke or anything, then that's not the way to go. Go to the window. If it's where they can't get out of the window because of either they cannot physically open it, or if it's too high, if they're on the 2nd story and they don't have a rope ladder to get down, then we tell them to stay by that window. If they had something to break the window to try to get out, if it wasn't too high, then that's an option also. But like we were talking about before, when we get to a fire, we're concerned about the life safety first. Mm-hmm. So if we get to the house, someone is known to be in there, we know where their bedroom is at, then likely we're going to go in through that window, and if they're sitting there waiting on us, then we can rescue them out.
Yeah, no feeling around trying to get to somebody that maybe already has smoke inhalation or something like that. So now, meeting place, you know, I've talked to people about, hey, do you have a meeting place like say the mailbox or a tree or a power pole or whatever? And, you know, I always mention to people, I say, well, how far away is that from the house? Because those meeting places, so we know the whole family's out, needs to be far enough away from the house. And a lot of times the mailbox is, you know, it could be closer to the home, but, you know, especially rural areas, you know, the mailbox is a good piece out there. But you need that point that is a good piece away, because you want to get away from the fire. Electrical wires could come down. You know, there's all kind of things involved in a fire, but we need that meeting place, don't we, Chief? That's
right. We need the meeting place. It lets us, when we get there, have accountability of the people. The mailbox, depending on exactly where it's located, is not a bad place, because, you know, we're going most likely to a place we've never been before. We're having to hunt for these address numbers, and if somebody's standing out by the road, then they can flag us in, and somebody standing there waving their arms is going to tell us, all right, we're at the right place now.
Great. That's a great idea there. And also, let's talk about the stove. A lot of fires start from the stove. Walk it away, whatever it might be, but let's talk about leaving things on the stove, walk it away, or whatever they might be that causes that fire.
That's right. There's a lot of different things that can can be the cause of the stove fire, but the most common that we see is somebody's cooking, starting to get the grease going, and the phone rings. Somebody comes to the door and knocks, or they have to use the restroom. If you have to leave that stove for any reason, please turn it off. Don't leave it unattended warming up, because you may think that I'm just going to be gone for a minute, but that minute turns into several minutes. And when we teach classes, I tell people that I think you could stand there and watch a pot of grease on the stove all day long and it would never catch fire. But as soon as you walk away from it, it's going to catch on fire.
Yeah.
So we need to be careful about that. A lot of times people will take, when they get done with grease, instead of pouring the grease back in the container, washing the pan, pot, or whatever, they'll store it in the stove. That's another way that stove fires happen, is somebody forgot that somebody else, or I may have done it. I may have put it in there and I forgot it, but now I want to cook some biscuits or cook something in the stove, turn the stove on, next thing you know, there's fire rolling out of the stove. So that's another thing. And
wow, that's a good one.
making sure that the stove is clean when you get done with the stove. And a lot of people will leave the pan on the stove and they'll think they're using a separate burner, and they actually turn the burner on that the grease is on, and the fire starts from that. So that's some common things that we see, and we discourage people from leaving grease on the stove or storing things inside the oven.
Okay, what if we come back into the room, we see that grease fire, whatever kind of fire coming from the stove? Should we try to put it out, or should we call the fire department, or both, or what should we do in that case?
What we advise people, it's always best to have a home fire extinguisher, or they have what's called stovetop fire stops that you can actually install up in the range hood. So once the fire gets hot enough, it activates it, and it's a self fire extinguisher. But what we tell people is, if it's contained to the pot itself and they have a proper extinguisher, then yes, try to put it out. But if it's already gotten into the cabinets and the ceiling and past where it started from, then leave it. Okay. Same thing with a trash can, and that's the example we use a lot of time, is say this trash can's on fire, it's only the trash can, the wall's not involved, then it's safe to try to put out. But if it's already got the wall on fire, the ceiling, then get everybody out and call us. But the other part of that is, even if you do get the fire out, or you think you've got the fire out, call us. We'll be glad to come, because a lot of these range hoods, some of them vent to the outside, some of them vent into the attic. So if there was fire on the stove, then it could have traveled up that pipe and got into the attic, and you've got fire burning above your head you don't know about. A lot of times we're going to have to tear those range hoods out and make sure that the fire is out, and you're going to have smoke. And if you use a fire extinguisher, then there's going to be a mess, and there's going to be a cloud of smoke from the dust from the extinguisher, and we can help clear that out with our fans. So call us. We'll be glad to come and help you in any way we can.
Okay, here comes, I'm going to have to confess to you right here on television. This is one of my weaknesses here. I think I do a good job at it, Chief, but every time I go out to clean the lint out of the dryer, I think I just did it, and then I start cleaning it out, and there's so much lint in there. So obviously, I'm confessing to my fire chief here, I'm not doing as good a job as I should have been doing. Help me here. Should I write a note on the dryer? Should I write it on my forehead? What? To do a better job of that, because that causes fires.
It does. The dryer is a common cause, and I advise people not to run the dryer when you're not at home, because fires do happen from the dryers, and if you just let it run, and which I actually had an instance where we were at home and the dryer was functioning fine as far as I knew. Well, we put the clothes in there before we went to bed, and the last thing I remember when I went to sleep is listening to the ba-bump, ba-bump, ba-bump of the dryer.
Right.
When I woke up 7 hours later, I still heard ba-bump, 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 and I leapt out of bed. I just knew that my laundry room was going to be on fire because that dryer had run all night long.
Wow.
So one of the safety switches had malfunctioned and allowed it to continue running. Thank goodness, I think it was only because of what we had in the dryer. It was jeans and things like that that are a little bit harder to burn, or else we would have had a fire in the utility room. So, I mean, we were there and that happened. Nobody woke up, nobody realized what was going on. So don't depend on your dryer to shut off, because sometimes they don't. But I can confess too that I pulling the lint trap out is not always enough to clean the dryer out. Because after that happened, of course, I had to work on the dryer and determine why that thing did what it did. And so I pulled out the back side of the dryer, and you'll be amazed at how much lint is down in the bottom of it. So really, cleaning that thing out once a year would not be a bad thing to do either, because because you're cleaning the lint trap does not mean you don't have lint down in the bottom or lint trapped in the hose that goes out underneath the house or outside the building.
Great advice there, because it does, not just that lint trap, but it does get down in there, because when I've got the tool to get down and get all the lint out of the bottom, I was saying, oh my goodness, this, and I was there by myself, but that's terrible, because that is a fire hazard. And going back to what we're talking about, it's Fire Safety Month. These are the things, and if you're sitting there right now saying, oh my goodness, I hadn't checked the lint lately, get up right now, or maybe wait till the show's over, because we got something I want to talk about in a minute, going to blow your mind. But wait just a minute, and I'll remind you that before we go. But check those dryers, check that oven, because that was a good point a minute ago. We preheat our oven for whatever, and if we did put the grease in there when we fried French fries yesterday or last week or whatever, and all of a sudden now that grease pan's in there, we preheat it for make some cookies or biscuits or whatever like we do, then all of a sudden we're waiting on it to preheat and we're causing a fire.
That's right. And if you have a self-cleaning oven, before you set that thing to self-clean, you need to make sure there's nothing in there, because we've had instances where somebody had that grease in there, and once it locks down, it's on. It is locked until it cools down. So we've had some times with those. Okay, well, good advice. Another thing, I hope you're learning something here today, because I've already learned 3 or 4 things myself just talking to the chief. We're going to take another commercial break. Stay with us. We'll be back right after this.
I'm Marcus Clements with Clements & King Insurance. Are you on Medicare or about to go on Medicare? Clements & King Insurance has all the answers to all that's available to you when you reach this age. Clements & King Insurance for all your health and life insurance needs.
%0 financing, and we'll just add it to your bill. Start saving today. It only makes sense. The City of Dublin Natural Gas. Welcome back, everybody. I want to talk about extension cords and keeping them up to date. And I go in people's homes visiting, and I see them going under the rug, and I think about just myself, what if that thing's frayed? And it's under that rug, so I'm thinking if it's frayed already, and they get frayed different reasons, it's going to catch the rug on fire. It is, and we see a lot of that happen. If you're using a lot of drop cords, you need to think about that, because drop cords are meant for a temporary purpose. They're not supposed to be a permanent solution. The best thing you can do is whatever you're wanting to power, have it directly plugged into the receptacle. And I know sometimes that's not possible, and we end up with some power strips and things like that. But
if you go to the dollar store and you buy your drop cords and your power strips, then you're increasing the likelihood of a fire. If you're having to use a power strip, you need to make sure that it's UL approved and it is a substantial one with a breaker in it, not just something that's extending the amount of things you can plug in, because they will overheat and they will cause a fire.
And on a recent interview, one of the previous fire prevention months, recent fire chief before you taught me about my toasters. And I just want to mention that just so you know. Toasters don't cost a whole lot. We buy cheap toasters, yet we keep them for years. I mean, and that in itself, you know, you got breadcrumbs in the bottom. We don't clean those out like we should. You know, and I'll throw myself in there. But because they are so inexpensive, throw that cheap toaster away and get you another toaster. And as cheap as they are, get you one a year, you know, because think about it, versus my house catching on fire, walking away from the toaster. You say, well, that's not hot grease. Well, toaster catch on fire, before you know it, flames are going up, caught something there's grease in the cabinet, there's whatever, chemicals, you name it. Even something like a toaster can cause a fire very quick in a home, can it?
That's right, and a lot of what we see is improper maintenance and not cleaning. If you take the time after you use something to clean it out, clean it up, then you have a less likely chance of a fire. There's always a defect or something that can cause a fire, but the cleaner you keep it, the less likely you are to have a fire.
And speaking of that, chemicals, storing chemicals, you know, a lot of us may have a laundry room and we put chemicals in there, whatever it might be, stuff tire shine for the car, or we may store a bottle of muriatic acid in there. Well, those in itself, if it gets hot enough in there, you know, they tell you how to store the stuff, you know, it's on the box.
That's right.
So let's talk about storing chemicals, and with that, talk to me a little bit about, you know, a lot of us like to fry fish. Frying fish under a shelter or on the back porch or something like that, is that safe?
No, as far as your chemicals and things like that, like you were alluding to, they do have manufacturers' instructions on where you should and where you shouldn't. So whatever it is you're storing, because those, like you say, those things can mix together and can make a mess and can cause some harmful gases. So we need to make sure we're mindful, make sure we're keeping it where children can't get a hold of them and be exposed to things that they don't need to be exposed to. So we do need to be thinking about, instead of just putting it wherever it'll fit, putting it somewhere that's safe for children and ourselves, and making sure we're not making a situation that doesn't need to be there. But as far as the frying fish, and which, you know, Thanksgiving's going to be coming up soon.
Frying turkeys.
Going to be frying the turkeys, and that's my favorite way to eat turkey is fried.
Yeah, I agree.
But you need to be careful and thoughtful of where you're frying that turkey at. I know it's nice to have it there on the back porch or under your shelter, but you've got to be thinking about, if this goes bad, what am I gonna, and there's a fire, what am I about to burn up just because of that? So being on a concrete area, out from under an awning or structure, be away from the structure is the best thing, because you may have done it 100 times, but the 101st time you may have an incident, you may have a fire. Yeah. And I mean, you're using propane, which is flammable, and something could malfunction. We've had some instances where the cylinder itself caught on fire because of a leak. Yeah. So we need to make sure our equipment is in good condition and that we're staying away from our houses, because if your turkey fryer or that cylinder catches on fire, we don't want to burn the house down too.
That's right. And one thing I make sure I do, and just to remind people, I love my gas grill. I used to love charcoal, but I love that gas grill now. But you can turn off the grill and you think the gas is gone. Well, if you don't turn off that cylinder, the cylinder's open. So What if one of the lines was malfunction on the grill, or what if something happened? Now that gas is on. So one thing I like to throw in, we should always turn that cylinder off at all times, shouldn't we?
That's right. When you're done with your grilling, leave your burners on, turn the cylinder off, and let that excess gas burn off and go away. So you will have the gas contained just to the cylinder and not in your lines and possibly leaking. Because like you say, it could take somebody just walking by and bumping one of those knobs, and now you've got gas leaking, and it can settle into areas and cause even more problems because it's looking for the path of least resistance, and it's looking for something to light it back off.
Okay, I promised you two things. One, I want to remind you about the lint in that dryer again. Make sure right after this show, go out and check that dryer. Get that lint out of that dryer. And the other, I told you I was going to tell you something that's going to blow your mind. It blew my mind, Chief, so much that you and I were somewhere the other day or talking, I don't know, we were at a function in town, something, might have been at City Hall, whatever. The older I get, you don't understand how that is. I can't remember like I used to. So, but this just blows my mind, Chief, that homes now burn so much quicker, you know, and I was telling you the other day, I said, you know, I was thinking about my grandparents' homes, and homes back in the day built out of fat lighter and had newspaper in the walls for insulation, you know, the older homes. But the fire marshal and all the science now tells us that homes built today burn a lot faster than the older homes.
They do, as you would say, and that people would think the fat lighter would burn up faster and go away, but it doesn't. The dimensions of the lumber that was used in years past is greater than it is now. So we've got smaller diameter lumber. The furniture is built in a different way with the foams and cushions and things. It burns just so much quicker and so much hotter, really.
Wow. I'm telling you, that was hard for me to believe. It's so hard. We've talked about it twice now, and I asked him on television, so it took me 3 times. That's how slow I am to catch on there, but it does make sense once you explain it to me, so it does make sense. But sometimes things, when you first hear it, you say, well, that ain't right there, but there's so much science has went into this that we know it's true. And that's one thing that we want you to know. We want the public to know. I sure want to know it, and that's why I always appreciate it. I don't care when I call on you, Chief. You always take the time to talk to me. So I really appreciate you talking to me today.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you coming by, and we'll definitely be out in the community doing the Fire Safety Month at the schools, and there's different functions. I think Fairview Park's got one coming up this month. So we'll be out and about. If anyone wants to come out, ask questions, we'll be glad to provide information, and because we want you to be safe. We want everybody to be safe.
Amen. It is Fire Prevention Month. You heard the Chief throughout the show. If you don't have a working fire detector, smoke detector, just call one of the fire departments. Some of the businesses in town have basically underwritten this project, so that's a great project there. You even heard the Chief say if you can't afford working batteries, we can even help you with that. Just call one of the fire departments here at the Dublin Fire Department, and we'll be glad to help. And I'm going to remind you one more time about those dryers now, because I'm telling you that it's so important. And you heard the Chief admit himself right here. He learned the hard way because a switch didn't work, you know, and just something we think as simple as a switch. We buy a dryer, it's supposed to work all the time, isn't it? A switch ain't supposed to tear up, is it, Chief?
Nope, that thing was supposed to shut off 60 minutes after I pushed that start button, but
7-8 hours later.
7-8 hours later, that was a very scary awakening for me.
That's right, and we laugh about it now because nothing bad happened, but it could have been a tragedy. So we want you to check these things. Go ahead, time changes here in just a few weeks, but go ahead and check those smoke detectors. There's testers on there, carbon monoxide, we talked about it. There's a button on there to test the carbon monoxide. Go ahead and check them. You don't have to wait to the last minute. Go ahead and check them. If they don't work now, you have a fire before time changes. You know, and then you have this loss. So make sure you check these things. Check the lint in those dryers. Now, if you don't check them, it's not our fault today, Chief, because you
right.
can't say we hadn't brought it up a few times.
We told them.
Okay, we told them, that's right. Okay, it's National Fire Prevention Month, and our Dublin Fire Department is a part of that, going to be in the schools. You heard the chief, and we just thank you for listening to us today and being a part of it. We're going to be running this show several times throughout the month. That's how important it is to us at the TV station. So we want you to learn these things, and not only learn them, do something about it. Keep your house safe, because loss of life is terrible, but the next thing to that to me would be losing all those sentimental things of my babies being born, my grandparents that are gone, you know, so many things that are important to us after that loss of life. So we do need to keep those things safe. So thank you for joining us today.